parallel and perpendicular lines. In this video, we're going to learn how to describe pairs of lines as parallel or perpendicular. Meet Larry. You know the white lines that are painted on sports fields? Well, it's Larry's job to paint them there. Today he's going to paint the lines for a running track. 1, 2. Oh dear, that's no good, Larry. You've made a mistake here. The lines of a running track always need to be the same distance apart. But the way Larry's painted these lines, they're not always the same distance apart at all. Try again, Larry. Those lines are much better. Can you see that this pair of lines are always the same distance apart? No matter how long Larry keeps painting for, these two lines are never going to cross. We call lines like this parallel lines. And inside the word parallel there's a little clue to help us remember what it means. Can you see the two letter L's next to each other? These two letters are straight lines that are always the same distance apart, aren't they? Even the letter L's in the word parallel are parallel. Now there's a way that we can show that our lines are parallel, and that's to draw two little arrowheads, one on each line. Whenever we see lines labelled like this, we know that they're parallel. Now Larry's going to paint the lines on a football field. 1, 2. Now does that corner look right to you? It doesn't, does it? These two lines need to make a square corner. That's much better. The two lines that join at the corner of a football field make a right angle. In maths, we describe two lines that join at a right angle using the word perpendicular. This is a fun word to say. Let's try splitting it up into each different syllable. Per, pend, ic, u, la. Perpendicular. We can say that these two lines are perpendicular because they meet at a right angle. And we can show that two lines are perpendicular by drawing a little right angle sign, which is a square, where they meet. So wherever we see this symbol, we know that the two lines are at right angles to each other. They're perpendicular. A really good real-life example of the sorts of lines we've been talking about is a railway line. And we're looking down on this railway line from above. But can you see the two tracks that make up our railway line are always the same distance apart? And you know railway tracks always have to be the same distance apart. Otherwise the train would come off the tracks, wouldn't it? Because our tracks are always the same distance apart and will never ever cross, we can describe them as being parallel. But don't forget, we don't need to label them using words. Instead, we can show that these two lines are parallel by drawing two little arrowheads. Now, by looking at the picture, we can see straight away that the pink lines or the railway tracks are parallel. Now, can you see any perpendicular lines on this picture? There are actually lots of them. Each of the railway sleepers is a rectangle, and we know that a rectangle has square corners. So we can see that these two sides of this sleeper meet at a right angle. They're perpendicular. But rather than writing out that long word all the time, we can simply show that these lines meet at a right angle by drawing a little right angle symbol or a square where they meet. And can you see that the line where the sleeper meets the track is also a right angle? There are lots of parallel and perpendicular lines in this picture, aren't there? Have a look around you, they're all over the place. Books on a shelf, the fence in your garden, even the screen that you're watching this video on. These two sides of the video screen meet at a right angle. And there are lots more to find if we carry on looking around the screen. These are all examples of pairs of perpendicular lines. And if we're looking for parallel lines on our video screen, we can see that the two sides of the screen are parallel, and also the two sides at the top and bottom of the screen are parallel too. Do you think you've learned now how to spot parallel and perpendicular lines? Let's have a go at answering some questions now where we have to put into practice what we know of pairs of parallel and perpendicular lines. Try saying that fast. These lines are perpendicular. What type of angle is highlighted in red? The first sentence in this question contains a really interesting word. Perpendicular. Now we're told that these lines are perpendicular. But which lines is it describing? Well, if we look in the picture, we can see two lines. We've got one that's vertical that goes up and down. And we've also got a horizontal line that's been drawn from left to right. Now what can we say about these lines? Well, firstly, we can see that they're straight lines. They're not curved at all, are they? We can also see that these two lines meet together. In fact, they cross over each other, don't they? Now, there are lots of ways we could draw two lines that cross over each other, like this, or this. But the two lines in our picture are interesting because they meet in a special way. When two lines are perpendicular, we know that they meet at right angles. But imagine that we read this first sentence and we didn't know what the word perpendicular means. Can you see another clue that helps us? This little symbol here is the symbol for right angles. So even if we're not quite sure what the word perpendicular means, we could look at the diagram, see this little symbol and think to ourselves, I know that these two lines meet at right angles. Now our question asks us, what type of angle is highlighted in red? Can you see what this is talking about? It's this angle here. How could we describe this angle? Well, because we know that these two lines are perpendicular, we can draw little right angle symbols at all the places where they meet. The angle that's shown in red is a right angle. When two lines are perpendicular, they meet at right angles. And that's how we know the type of angle that's highlighted in red is a right angle. Complete using parallel or perpendicular. The two red-coloured lines are what? This is an interesting four-sided shape, isn't it? You might not know the name of it, but it doesn't matter. Because in this question, all we need to think about are the two red-coloured lines that we can see that make up the sides of the shape. Here and here. Now we need to describe these two lines. We're told that we have to complete the sentence using either the word parallel or perpendicular. Do you remember what these two words mean? Parallel lines are always the same distance apart. They can never ever cross. But perpendicular lines do touch. In fact, they meet at right angles. Now, if we look at our two red-coloured lines, we can see straight away that they don't meet at right angles. In fact, they're not touching at all, are they? They must be the same distance apart. Now, if we look at the top and the bottom of the two red lines, it does look like they're the same distance apart. But without a ruler, how can we tell? Well, there's a clue in the picture. We know that whenever we see a pair of lines labelled using arrowheads like this, they are parallel. So we can see that they're the same distance apart, but we can also see that they've been labelled to show this. The two red-coloured lines are parallel. Complete using parallel or perpendicular. The two red-coloured lines are what? In this question, we're given a picture of a shape, and two of its sides are coloured red. Now, how can we describe these two red-coloured lines? Are they parallel or are they perpendicular? We know that when two lines are parallel, they're always the same distance apart. So if we think about this red line here to begin with, a line that's parallel to this line might look like this, or even this. Or if we look at the red line at the bottom of our shape, a line that's parallel to this might look like this, or even this. But when we look at the two lines together and compare them, we can see that they're not parallel with each other at all, are they? Just like two railway tracks, parallel lines never touch. But we can see that these two lines do touch. In fact, where they meet, a little symbol's been drawn. Do you remember what this symbol means? It's the symbol we use to show a square corner or a right angle. And we know that the word we use to describe a pair of lines that meet at a right angle is perpendicular. These two sides of the shape meet at a right angle, and so we can say the two red coloured lines are perpendicular. Which of the following letters has parallel lines? Y, F, A, or L? Now we know when two lines are parallel, they're always the same distance apart. So when we look at them, they look like they're going in exactly the same direction. These two lines are parallel, so are these. But we couldn't say that these two lines are parallel because these aren't always the same distance apart. Now in our question, we're given some capital letters to look at, and we're asked which one of them has parallel lines. Now to help us answer the question, let's write these capital letters really big. And we're going to use a different colour for each line that makes up the letter. To begin with, we've got the letter Y. Now we can write the letter Y by drawing a straight line up like this, and two lines at the top that make a sort of V shape. Now can you see any pairs of lines in this letter that are always the same distance apart? They never touch and they're going in the same direction. We can't, can we? If we look at the pink line and the orange line, well, they're touching and they're not the same distance apart. And the same is true of the green line and the orange line. And even if we look at the pair of lines that make the V shape, that's the pink line and the green line, we can see that the distance between them isn't always the same at all. The letter Y doesn't have any parallel lines. What about the letter F? We can write a capital F by drawing a straight line upwards and then two shorter horizontal lines. Can you see any parallel lines in this letter? If we look at the orange line and the pink line to begin with, we can see that they meet at a right angle. They're not parallel, but we could describe them as being perpendicular. Unfortunately though, we're not looking for perpendicular lines, which is a shame, because the orange line and the green line are perpendicular too. Now what if we compare the green line and the pink line? We can see that they are always the same distance apart and they do go in the same direction. These two lines are parallel, and we can show that they're parallel by drawing little arrowheads, one on each line. Wherever we see lines labelled like this, we know they're parallel. Looks like we've found our answer, doesn't it? Let's just check the other letters. We can see that in the letter A, none of the lines are parallel. And the two lines that make up the letter L aren't parallel either. We could say they're perpendicular though, they meet at a right angle, don't they? Out of the four letters that we're given, the one that has parallel lines is the letter F. And if you get a spare moment, why not see if there are any other letters of the alphabet that have parallel lines too? Determine the colours of the lines that are perpendicular to each other. In the picture we can see three different coloured lines: blue, black and yellow. The question asks us to find the colours of the lines that are perpendicular to each other. We know that when two lines are perpendicular to each other, they're at right angles with each other. Now there's something interesting about these three lines. None of them are touching, are they? This makes it a little more difficult to spot whether they're at right angles to each other. How can we spot a right angle? You know, if we're ever not sure whether an angle is a right angle or not, we can always just take the corner of a piece of paper, just like the one we've ripped off here, and we can see whether it fits between two lines. Because we know the corner of a piece of paper is a square corner or a right angle. Let's think of this corner of a piece of paper as a special right angle tester. Can you see where we could place it on our picture? Here's a clue, you're going to have to turn it slightly. It fits here, doesn't it? Although the lines aren't touching, we can see that the blue and black lines are perpendicular to each other. And we can see that if we continued the black line so that the lines did cross, they'd meet at a right angle. The colours of the lines that are perpendicular to each other are blue and black. So what have we learned in this video? We've learned how to describe pairs of lines as parallel or perpendicular.